And this by the absolute truth, Satyat Ananda Vigraha, in fullness. So we have the nature of happiness because we're part and parcel of the Supreme, Ananda, Paramananda. So pursuing happiness is of the soul, it's intrinsic. And not only in the human species, all species. All three are there are natural pursuits for living entities. Wanting to be eternal, that means not wanting to die, being fearful. We discussed this a little bit the other day. Well, that was in Gita Nagari. How to become fearless, or less fearful at least. So the material situation is one that leaves us wanting happiness. And so there's the pursuit of happiness. And the obstacle, one of the obstacles is we have a wrong conception of what happiness is, or an illusory conception. So I don't watch movies, but I was told there's a movie called Matrix. Yeah, you know about it, Matrix. So there's the Matrix guy. He's got a problem. Someone's got a problem, and he offers them the reality pill or the illusion pill. Which one would you like? But of course, they say, "Well, I want the reality pill. I want the reality pill." So, what is real happiness? Or why is life difficult? These are just very broad, general questions. How do I learn to be happy? So, the answer from a spiritual perspective, obviously, is you leave behind the material conception and adopt a spiritual conception. So, this starts with distinguishing reality from illusion. The nature of illusion. This is a nice BBT painting. There's Maya, Mahamaya. And in the center, where this radiating light comes from, there's three deities, the deities of the three modes of nature. If you can see, the screen is pretty small, but that's what the image is. Vishnu in the center, Brahma and Shiva on either side. And those are the deities who are the presiding deities of the three modes of nature. And the three modes of nature work or make a network of illusion. So they're agents of Mahamaya, the modes of nature, and it leaves us wanting happiness or searching for happiness. The material conception is on the platform of the body. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you may die. So enjoy while you can, because it's not going to last forever. So get as much as enjoyment on the physical plane as you can. Another BBT painting. This is illustrating the bird in the cage metaphor. There's a nice lady. She's very busy polishing the cage. And as the cage is being polished and polished and polished, she's not paying attention to the reason that there's a cage. The reason there's a cage is the bird inside. And by neglecting the bird inside the cage, the bird might die. So in this metaphor, the polishing the cage has to do with the body being like a cage, and then the bird inside is the soul inside the cage. So there are needs of the body for sure, and while the needs of the body are being looked after, don't neglect the needs of the soul, because that's the platform of happiness. So there's several verses we'll make reference to from Canto 11, chapter 8. Canto 11, chapter 8 is part of Uddhava Gita. You know what is Uddhava Gita? You've heard of it before? What is it? Don't know? Bhagavad Gita is Krishna speaking to Arjuna, and Uddhava Gita is Krishna speaking to Uddhava. And who's Uddhava? Just as Arjuna is one of Krishna's cousins, Uddhava is one of Krishna's cousins. There's a very nice, I'll spend some time. Krishna's father, Vasudeva, had a sister and a brother. He had several brothers. One of his brothers was named Devabhaga. Devabhaga had a son named Uddhava. And one of Uddhava's sisters is Partha, or Pritha. And then so his cousin is Partha, the son of Pritha. Devaki. So here's from that section of the Bhagavatam. A conditioned soul, that's us, undergoes a great deal of trouble to obtain a little happiness. After struggling in material life, which is full of hardship and hypocrisy, one may receive a little sense gratification, but this illusory pleasure in no way offsets the burden of suffering one must bear to obtain it. The painting is the donkey chasing the carrot, or the bundle of grass, or whatever the classic modern metaphor is, chasing the carrot. So the carrot may be on a stick, and the stick is dangling in front of the donkey, and the donkey is trying to get the carrot and trying to get the carrot and trying to get the carrot, so it keeps taking another step and another step, seeking that morsel of something nice, and chasing the carrot is materialistic life, seeking the pleasures of the senses. I just received a letter today. There's a verse in Bhagavad Gita 247. Does anybody know the verse, Bhagavad Gita 247? Karma eva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. You know the verse? Can you say the verse? Say it loud enough so we can hear it. Okay. I can hear her. In case you can't hear her, she got it right. And the verse says, you're entitled to perform your prescribed duty, but you're not entitled to the fruits of your prescribed duty. So the person that wrote this letter said that they're in a discussion with another devotee, and the other devotee said they struggle with this verse because, in their estimation, if you strive to perform your duty, but you're not entitled to the results of your duty, then you become complacent and lazy. That's, the donkey. Without the carrot dangling in front of the donkey's not, why carry the load? Why perform the work? Why do the duty? The missing part, there's many missing parts, but one big missing part is, it's not you deny the existence of the fruit, but you, rather than trying to be the enjoyer of the fruit, you're not entitled to be the enjoyer of the fruit. So what do you do with the fruit? It's offered to Krishna. And it's a type of karma yoga. But karma yoga is a subset of bhakti yoga. But karma yoga isn't the fullness of bhakti. For us, it's easy. you offer the result of Krishna. You do what your duties are, what your nature is. You act according to your nature in prescribed fashion, and the result goes to Krishna. Most of us live in a house, and building a house is something that it's a material event. You take some stone and or wood and bricks and mortar and cement and this and that and the other thing, and you build a house. And so it's material elements for material purpose, but devotees build houses too. There's a nice devotee I know for many, many years, Prithu Shrava and Donna Kelly. Prithu Shrava is a Prabhupada disciple. Donna Kelly is disciple of Ganapati Swami. So they were, one of the reasons I spent so much time in Chicago is because my relationship with Prithu Shrava, because Prithu Shrava and Donna Kelly, they liked college preaching very much. In fact, that's all they did. They were householders, and they maintained themselves as householders by distributing books at colleges. And they were really good at it. They weren't like, fanatical. They just were dedicated, very, very sincere, very sattvic, both of them, very sattvic persons. And Prithu Shrava had, in addition to his nature of wanting to do college preaching, he has the kind of nature that he liked to work with his hands. So after some time, they decided to enter into like a Vanaprastha stage. They moved to a New Taliban farm in Louisiana, and he got a chance to build a house. And he was really happy because it's part of his nature to build things. There's nothing wrong with, I'm just giving this an example, there's nothing wrong with doing stuff for Krishna. So it's they're not entitled to enjoy the fruits. So they're living in the house. But what's the purpose of the house? In their lives, it's very clear. Purpose of their life, and is including the house, is service to Krishna. Because many of the days they would just sleep in their van. They don't need a house. They're very austere. Literally bucket showers, just like brahmacharis, grahastas, living in a van, traveling around the country, and then coming back to the temple. And so, but they don't need. The purpose of the house was for a place of service. I'm making the point of working. Back to the Bhagavad Gita verse, one is entitled to perform prescribed duty, but you're not entitled to the fruits. But someone is entitled to the fruits. What do you do with the fruits? You work, and then there's fruits of your work. What do you do with it? You don't trash it. You don't dump it, put it in the dumpster. You offer it to Krishna. Now that's the bhakti principle. Then it's not just the result goes to Krishna, but everything goes to Krishna. Consciousness, your words, everything. So karma yoga is a step in the direction of, we have space right here in the front row. We saved the front row space for you guys. You don't want it, it's okay too. So this is a statement by Krishna to Uddhava in the 11th canto Bhagavatam about material life and the illusory pleasure of material life. And there's something that keeps people chasing the carrot. So there's some flickering, limited and temporary, in the language of Bhagavad Gita. Dukkalayam ashashvatam. Dukkha, it's read as happiness, but it's, according to Bhagavad Gita, it's distress. is distress in part because that's where it leads to. And it's temporary, limited and temporary, and a lot of endeavor to get the limited and temporary. And what happens when you get the limited and temporary? Besides, it didn't really satisfy, and so I want more. And when you get more, what happens? Not enough, you want more. So greed is a characteristic that goes along with imitating the position of the Purusha. You know the Sanskrit words, Prakriti, Purusha? Yeah. Purusha, in principle, Purusha is the enjoyer, and Prakriti means the enjoyed. It can mean other things. Prakriti means nature, material nature, like these nice flowers here on the table. Prakriti, material nature. Long drive to get here, huh? So Purusha, Prakriti. And there's Parama Purusha, that's the supreme enjoyer, and he's the enjoyer of that which is his. Prakriti is his. Material nature, spiritual nature, matter and spirit, they're his energies, Prakriti. There's Para Prakriti and Apara Prakriti, inferior, superior nature, but it's his nature. So he's the enjoyer of his nature. He's the intended enjoyer of everything. However, there's living entities that want to take the position of the enjoyer. And when it doesn't satisfy them more and more and more and more, it's not like I took the wrong turn. Let me hit the reset button and see if I got another program here. Krishna is the enjoyer program. But as long as the material idea, this is the topic, is happiness. And what is happiness? The illusory sense of happiness doesn't satisfy. And so if you stay on that program, then it's more and more and more. And there's a problem. There are many statistics. I'm not sure what the recent ones are, but some years ago, the rate of utilization of the resources of material nature by the United States alone, what to speak of the rest of the world, we would need about 7 Earth planets if the whole world lived at the enjoyment of the resources of nature of the United States people. And there's a problem. There's only one. And so because there's only one, and there's a want, not a need, but a want for more resources or more pleasure, more stuff, so I can be the enjoyer of stuff, then there's wars. And it goes in waves. Sometimes it's less warlike, sometimes more warlike. Now seems to be on the rise of wars in the world. Now continuing with, this is Krishna speaking to Uddhava, 11th canto, chapter 8. Here's an illustration from another verse. You see at the bottom on the left, see the dagger, the knife, and the rest of it is like a forest. It's to illustrate this verse of the same chapter, 11th canto. The network of material desires is created when one falsely thinks that he can establish himself permanently in the material world. This binding network should be cut, that's the sword at the bottom, by the sword of detachment, semicolon. Otherwise, one will be forced to wander in the illusory network of Maya with no understanding of liberated life on the spiritual platform. Now, this is not a different teaching than Bhagavad Gita teaching. It's just more elaborate. It's kind of the undergraduate, graduate study of the same message of Bhagavad Gita. more elaborately discussed. Certainly, detachment is a principle of spiritual life. Certainly, it's a principle of Bhagavad Gita, and it's strongly expressed by Krishna to Uddhava. Here is the Bhagavad Gita message, very similar. The language is different. Chapter 5, Bhagavad Gita. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. We want happiness that is ever increasing and doesn't end. That's a nice plan. But material happiness doesn't fulfill that want. We want happiness that is ever increasing and doesn't end, because that's our rightful position. That's that's who we really are in the spiritual atmosphere. But in the spiritual atmosphere, it's not my mind and senses are at the center. It's a very simple point. Very simple point. How does one evaluate oneself? How am I doing in spiritual life? Really simple. Who's at the center? Is it possible? We had a lengthy discussion about this, spanned over 3-4 days in Naperville not so long ago. Is it possible to be a practicing devotee where the notion is that Krishna should be pleased, but really I'm at the center? It's about my happiness. Thank you. Self-centered bhakti. It's a contradiction. But it's not only possible, it's quite common. In fact, as long as there's the bodily conception, or say it the verse, as long as there's not a full spiritual conception of self and my position as meant for the pleasure of Krishna, that's who I am, I'm meant for the pleasure of Krishna, then it's going to be about my happiness or my realizations or my attaining higher states of consciousness, or I'm at the center. It's real easy. We take our baggage with us. We try to take our baggage with us into the spiritual atmosphere. It's embarrassing, but it's common. So that's buddhi, intelligent person, not taking part in activities like that. Here's 7th canto, chapter 7. This is Prahlad Maharaj teachings to his classmates. Canto 7, chapter 7. One is happy as long as one does not endeavor for happiness, semicolon. As soon as one begins his activities for happiness, his conditions of distress begin. Now that's material happiness. That's with the definition of what. Is there such a thing as spiritual happiness? Yes, but that's part of our topic. Overcoming distress, finding real happiness, means overcoming illusion of what happiness is and how to get what real happiness is. So practically speaking, the same as antavat tu palam tesham. By its nature, sense pleasure mandates renunciation of enjoyment. I mean, how many ice cream things can you eat? And if you indulge at a certain point, it's repulsive. You're going to have some medical problem. That's on the tongue. And then, let's see. Yeah. There's some sound connected with the presentation. Let's see if it works. Oh. Burns like fire. Do it again. So, lust, we have that verse from the Bhagavad Gita. Lust is insatiable and it burns like fire. So, live a life of sense indulgence, live a life of sexual indulgence, and then comes the final stage. There's supposed to be some sound with this too. That's rock music. He says we're out of any time minutes. Death comes, and that position of happiness comes to a grinding halt suddenly. So now we're going to spend a little bit of time looking at the option, and it's a far more attractive, at least for a thoughtful, intelligent person, it's far more attractive. Spiritual happiness doesn't neglect the body, the mind, and the intelligence, but it keeps what's at the center. So you have 4 triangles, makes a nice pyramid, and spiritual is at the center. If one makes one's existence striving for spiritual happiness, the other forms of happiness follow. Say the same thing a couple different ways. Material well-being follows spiritual well-being, like a shadow follows the object that casts a shadow. So there's some light. So supposing there's a shadow that's being cast by that light. If I want the shadow to move, I don't try to move the shadow. I try to move the object that's casting the shadow. And it's true from spiritual, supposing one is not well spiritually, but supposing one gets on a path of spiritual wellness, and then from that's punya shravana kirtana, by hearing and chanting about Krishna, piety, not just material but spiritual piety increases, and from that spiritual piety increases, material well-being increases without a separate effort. It's true, it works. It doesn't happen, it's like the snap of the fingers. It doesn't happen instantly. We don't get in the material condition instantly. We don't get out of it instantly either. So what to do? Spiritual happiness. So there you see this little image that just showed up in the middle. That's the spirit soul. Now we're going to go back to Uddhava Gita, where Krishna says to Uddhava, material desire is undoubtedly the cause of the greatest unhappiness, and freedom from such desire is the cause of the greatest happiness. Now, freedom from such desire this is not speaking of desirelessness, this is speaking of spiritual desire. So, from Bhagavad Gita, it's very simple. What is called renunciation is the same as yoga or linking with the Supreme, because no one can be actually renounced without linking with the Supreme, or say it the other way. By linking with the Supreme, there's renunciation. The disconnect with the pursuit of material happiness is the pursuit of Krishna's happiness, the linking with the Supreme. You pursue Krishna's happiness, and that's the greatest happiness. So in order to relinquish desire for material happiness requires linking with the desire for Krishna's happiness. It's very simple. And negation doesn't work. It doesn't endure. It may work temporarily, but it's not natural. Prabhupada's example, It's very simple. Supposing someone is banging their head against the wall and it hurts. So they stop banging their head against the wall. Ah. But that's not what happiness is. You don't stop banging your head against the wall. If that's not what happiness is, what is real happiness? It's Krishna's happiness. That's real happiness. Or love, supreme, is real happiness. And when one comes to that platform by cultivation of that platform, by cultivation of practicing sadhana bhakti, then one can come to the position of the greatest happiness. Similar idea, not identical, but similar here in Bhagavad Gita. A liberated person, chapter 5 again. A liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance, enjoying pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. Now this has to do with, the subtle body, starting with the mind, and the mind is directed generally towards sense objects. But if the perception matches the spiritual conception, that's who we are, then the mind can be fixed. So we engage in hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, using the senses of objects that are in relation to Krishna, especially the hearing sense, because the hearing sense is the most powerful of all the senses. Engage the hearing sense, then the mind can be fixed. Is it true? Well, most of us don't have a fixed mind. So we can't say yes or no. But the acharyas tell us yes. Here, I'll give two references. Two of my favorite references. One of them is Rupa Goswami, and another is Bhaktisiddhanta. Is there newer people? Is anybody here that does not know who is Rupa Goswami, and you'd like to know who is Rupa Goswami before I say something about him? You all know. Okay, great. And if you don't, it's okay too. He's a intimate associate of Lord Chaitanya. From Lord Chaitanya, he received elaborately, for months, he received very elevated teachings in bhakti, the science of devotional service, and then powered by Lord Chaitanya to write books elaborating on those teachings of bhakti. And so one of the books that he wrote was a drama of Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan and Krishna's pastimes after he left Vrindavan. It's a really beautiful book, very, very poetic and beautifully written. Vidagdha Madhava, Lalita Madhava. And in the introductory section of Vidagdha Madhava, he writes about hearing Krishna's name. I'll just say it. This is not the exact translation. How much nectar are in the two syllables Krishna? Who can say? First part. It's the glorification of the name. Next. When one vibrates the sound, Krishna, there's such sweetness, one wants many, many mouths to make that sound. That's one, if you're on the platform of Rupa Goswami, you like that sweetness, because the question is how much nectar is in the two syllables. Then the third, so the glorification, the making of the sound, the hearing of the sound. How much nectar there is in the sound. When the ears hear the sound, one wants millions of ears. Not sufficient to hear that sound. So that's the hearing part. So glorification, vibrating, hearing, and then the final is, and when the ear hears nicely, the sound enters the courtyard of the heart. And the sound dances in the courtyard of the heart. The mind becomes stunned, and the senses become inert. That's yoga. Control of the mind and senses by the process of hearing the sound of Krishna's name. That's Rupa Goswami. Very quickly, much more quickly, Bhaktisiddhanta writes similarly, when one hears the sound of Krishna's name, the ear conquers the mind. If you're having a problem controlling your mind, practice as much as you can, focus on the sound of the mantra. Just hearing the sound. And if you actually hear the sound, the mind becomes conquered and the senses become inert. Very similar to what Rupa Goswami writes. The senses become inert. The agitation of the senses to do something, get something, see something, taste something, plan something, that's the mind. Just by hearing. So that's this verse in Bhagavad Gita 5:21. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. The instrument of concentration is the mind. Driving the mind is the soul. But if the soul wants to make that connection, then the mind can be connected, primarily through the hearing process. Chapter 6, Bhagavad Gita. We're almost done. See the self by the pure mind, and relish and rejoice in the self in this joyous state, what is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses, established thus, when never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks, there's no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This is indeed actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. Now, the context of my speaking on this little presentation was the person who was the host of the program. They selected the topic because they just lost their job. And they were in big distress. They didn't know what's going to happen, the uncertainty and maintaining the family, and when am I going to do? And I sit here and twiddle my thumbs, and the job market is what it is, and there were a lot of anxiety. For practical service reasons. So even in the greatest, there's difficulty. It's just the nature of the place in which we live. The place of duality is sometimes and sometimes. Sometimes happiness, sometimes in distress. Sometimes honor, sometimes dishonor. Sometimes pleasure, sometimes pain. Sometimes and sometimes. In the neighborhood where Prem Kishore lives, there was a calamity. Some workers were putting in some kind of a something or other line, and they made a mistake. They broke the water main. Right in the middle of the street, for half the day, water was flying into the air. The street was totally blocked, and it was like panicky, and 2 houses flooded, probably damaged beyond repair, who knows, something. So you never know. Wait a while, and something. And then you address to something, and then there's another something. It's just the nature of the place. It's the place of duality. Sometimes it's not so bad. Sometimes there's happiness, sometimes there's distress. Sometimes pleasure, sometimes pain, sometimes. And miseries arising from material contact. Is there freedom? As long as we're embodied, there's going to be duality. So how do you have inner consciousness that's above duality? That's a good question. And that's yoga. And we're meant, living in the modern world, to practice yoga. And that doesn't mean going to a secluded Himalaya mountain or something like that. It can mean that, but that's not the prescribed method. The prescribed method, we know what the prescribed method is. It's this method of Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, and then the other 6 processes of bhakti. And that can put one in touch with real happiness. There is such a place of real happiness, and there's a way to access it, and it's through sound. Carefully hearing from the right broadcaster of sound, with the ear that's very attentive, and not just superficial attentive, but very attentive. And then, supposing someone's not very attentive. I mean, some people are very attentive. I do a lot of public speaking, and it's very easy to tell when someone is not being attentive. And it's easy to tell when some people are being very attentive. There's some people that are just really good at being very attentive. And it doesn't have to, it's not related to age. Some young people are very attentive. Some older people are very attentive. Most people are kind of okay. But to go beyond the miseries arising from material contact, it takes a mind that's controlled, and control the mind through sound. Elevate and purify through that which is pure. So as Krishna says to Bhagavad Gita, this is the end. He speaks the whole Bhagavad Gita, then he turns it over to Arjuna. Deliberate on this fully and then do what you wish to do. So Arjuna is very clear because he heard carefully. And that's the conclusion of our presentation. See if there's some discussion.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you so much for the wonderful class. Maharaj, how to forget the impressions?
How to do what?
How to forget the impressions
How to forget impressions
of gratification, material gratification that we have?
I had I had a discussion with Bhaktirupa. You know who's Bhaktirupa? Prabhupada disciple, Bhaktirupa. Very close associate of Gaur Govinda Maharaj, lived in Puri with Gaur Govinda Maharaj, and he was like very dedicated to him. Very capable Western person, about the same age. And we had a discussion on this topic. King Kulashekar. Okay. Some of you are a little on the newer side. King Kulashekar was one of the, previously he was a king, but he became a detached person. And he's quoted by Prabhupada as saying, whenever I think of, because he was a king, he indulged his senses. And something happened. He became not just an elevated Vaishnava, but became a great Vaishnava. So he wrote, one of his writings is, whenever I think of sex life, I spit on the thought. So that's one response. So, memories, but it's detachment. It's, we are paying the price for misuse of our free will. And it's not prarabdha karma necessarily, but it's just memories of stuff. One devotee spoke to me at your program yesterday about remembering his past sinful activities. And anyway, with it, details, but if you have another shelter, you can feel a sense of regret towards those indulgences, wrong indulgences, past impressions. Past impressions are like, it's sometimes described as being like a photo file. The mind, the nature of, this is Sankhya lesson, the nature of the senses is, the senses pick up information, the eyes, the ears, the nose, tongue, touch, pick up in combination, pick up signals from sense objects and send the signals to the mind. And the mind takes a photo. So better than Bill Gates' method of storing data, the mind is a very subtle way of, all those impressions are there. Not just this lifetime. Maybe you've heard Prabhupada say, I've heard him say it like many times, when he was 6 months old, he was he was laying on the lap of his sister who was knitting. Now, I don't have remembrances of when I was 6 months old and what was up when I was 6 months old. But Prabhupada, it's in the photo file somewhere. And when those photo file memories come into the mind, boop, it's prompted by the material energy. So you see it, but you don't identify with it, and you tolerate it, and you move on. It can be just a reminder of misuse of free will memory. Now, some people have a bad memory. I have a bad memory for good things too. But if memory comes for not good things, misuse of free will or indulgence of the senses and sense objects, you tolerate. Tangsa tiksha swabharata. That's the entry level. And then rise above it. So that is, well, it's just like a flash. I don't relate with it. It's not me, and it's back there somewhere, but it's not me. Back there somewhere is the covering senses and sense objects and in experience. So I don't invest much time and energy in it. Rather the investing time and energy in transcendence, like King Kulashekar. So as much as one can be absorbed in where I'm going, you don't have to spend so much time in where you've been. Just a little sharing, because the nature of your question, before you take the note. When I was growing up, I had 3 sisters and a brother. I was the little one in a family of 5. And my sister was just a little older than me. We did lots of stuff together, siblings, and, lots of stuff. So a close relationship. And when I became a devotee, she didn't panic. She just wanted to check out and make sure it's, the real deal. She told me later, and she was very satisfied. I've connected with something that's, my little brother did something that was, the real deal. Once I was visiting her, and she said, I know a Brigu reader in Lucknow who can tell you your previous 12 lives, what exactly you were and what you did. Are you interested? Immediately I said, no, thank you. I'm not interested in where I've been. I'm interested in where I'm going. It's that's a past impression memory as I'm sitting here having this discussion with you, remembering that exchange with my sister. But it didn't disappear because it's still a memory that's in the photo file. But it's not what's meaningful. Past impressions are there may be, a bunch of them alike. You know, there's names for it in Sanskrit. Vasana. A tendency, vasana, tendency that has repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated. Like these two young college guys. You probably have been musicians for lifetimes. Just you grow up with music. It's in your blood. So there's nothing wrong with it. You direct that towards higher consciousness places. Music for Krishna. Yes.
Okay, now you can hear me. Thank you. One sharing. I think that today when we talk about we are not finding happiness because our misconception of what happiness is about.
Mm.
Looking at the same theme from maybe a different angle, we can also see that we're not happy because we we do we do not put happiness as the first priority in life. We prioritize something else instead. For example, I do not have this, or I didn't achieve that, so I cannot be happy. My parents or my spouse or my children do not behave in certain way that I want them to behave, so I cannot be happy. Or like other people don't see me or don't hear me in a way that I want to be seen or heard, then I cannot be happy.
These are
And-
needs.
and
Needs.
yeah, and
And
in this way we give up happiness for all these things. But in actuality, we have no control over any of these things. The one thing that we do have control over is our choice
Free
to
will.
be happy. And one synonym for happiness is satisfaction. And in Gita chapter 17, Krishna says that satisfaction is one of the austerities of the mind. And in that sense, be happy or be satisfied is a choice and is a practice.
Mm.
If we really put happiness as our first priority, and very seriously study what is happiness and practice it diligently, I think likely will be happy.
Well, it's exactly what Prahlad says. In different words, but it's exactly what Prahlad says. Succinctly. Now, you've had a question every class, so waiting for your question.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Guru Maharaj. My question is, how do we remember to how do you remember the fact that Krishna allowed us to do all of this, and that we should always give our efforts to him?
Well, that's a gift of wisdom. And wisdom, the gift of wisdom is given to those who are attached to the source of the giver of wisdom. So the solution, the answer is you become attached to Krishna. And how do you become attached to Krishna? So by practicing that which is our nature, instead of that which isn't our nature, you practice that which is your nature, and attachment to Krishna comes. There's a very nice, I've repeated it many times lately, there's a very nice statement in Krishna book. Krishna book is the 10th canto summary study. At the end, the final chapter of Canto 10, Srimad Bhagavatam, is 90. And the end of the chapter 90, towards the end of chapter 90, Prabhupada writes, the more one engages in hearing these nice topics of Krishna, one desires to hear them again and again, and in this way, attachment to Krishna grows. And there's the answer to your question. Hear topics of Krishna. It doesn't have to be Krishna book, but topics about Krishna in relation to Krishna. And then attachment grows. And then you'll always remember, because you remember that which you're attached to. You remember that which you're attached to. So if we're attached to material, we're going to remember the material. And if we're attached to the source of everything, by hearing about the source of everything, etc., the name, fame, qualities, pastimes, teachings. Okay.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Yes.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. My question is, in the effort to be detached from, like material things and status and all that, I do find that there could be a risk of, for a lot of us to spiritually bypass or like disassociate from very like real visceral emotions. So my question is, in your opinion, what is the difference between detachment and disassociation?
The difference between detachment and
Disassociation.
disassociation. You want to answer this one? This is one of your topics, isn't it? She was sharing with me some of the things that she's studying lately. I don't embarrass you. You're blushing. She understands these things. She's so private that you can have some discussion with her. She understands these things very well. I said it before, and I'll just repeat it. Who is at the center? And if Krishna is at the center, that's detachment. And if Krishna is not at the center, it's the other. It's very simple. Litmus test. Master or base. Tip to stick the paper in is who's at the center. Is it? You follow? Yeah. So largely, we're not there yet. I mean, some persons in the room here may be already there, but most of us are not already there yet. And so it's a mix. It's not all this or all that. But we take our baggage with us. The tendency is to take our baggage with us. Even we're moving in the spiritual direction. So there's a mix. It's honoring and acknowledging in honesty the fact that they're not there yet, what to do. You continue with the process and the purification process, practicing, and try in your utmost best to specifically when it comes to sound vibration, hear spiritual sound vibration with maximum attention. And over a period of time, something happens, cleansing and awakening. And then it's not the disassociation thing anymore, it's the attachment thing with Krishna at the center. There's a question all the way in the back.
Hare
Hare
Krishna
Krishna.
Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisance. All Krishna Srila Prabhupada.
Glories to Prabhupada. Good to see you.
Maharaj, I want to share something with you.
Go right ahead. If you're going to share with everybody else too, I hope.
Yeah, a couple of, and of course, instructions received from you. A couple of years back in the Japa retreat, you said, try and increase your rounds. This is a general instruction you gave everybody. We all have 16 rounds minimum.
Yeah.
And you said, try and increase. And then also, if I remember rightly, that my chanting, at least, Maharaj, is Abbas.
Abbas.
Inattentive chanting. But still increase it a little bit. So following that, I increased it a couple of rounds. And after a year or so, increased that further. So it came to 21 rounds. Then about a month back to 25 rounds. But Maharaj Abbas.
Okay.
Now I'll tell you what happened. And so many things that intellectually we have accepted, but the realization is not there. From the Shastras, Gurus, and Sadhus. So a couple of weeks ago, I was on the freeway doing 65, 70, whatever is that. And two cars ahead on the left was a pickup truck, open pickup truck, and he had some metal chairs behind. And one flew off, bounced on the road, hit the car behind him, and came straight at me. Now at that speed, Maharaj, the reaction is to swerve to the right.
Yeah.
But somehow I held the wheel steady. There was a truck which whizzed by. So if I had to turn left, it could have been serious at the very least. Next week, again on the freeway, another freeway, there's a truck on the left, I'm to his right, and his tire bursts. And the whole rubber comes and hits the windshield.
Your car.
My car. And at high speed, Maharaj, 65, 70, whatever. So again, the presence of mind to slow down and not swerve here or there. And what I found surprising is typically when such things happen, or you could say, to me, I thought it was a near death, especially with that truck coming. You know, you have the body response of adrenaline kicking in.
Yeah.
The heart starts. But I was kind of very cool. I wasn't phased. It was a little unnerving, but not what I expected. So I came home and I was talking with Sachi Rani. I said, this will happen. So she's saying, Krishna has said that boldly declare, Arjuna, that my devotee will never perish. But somehow that didn't sit proper with me. So in one class with Haladhar Swami, I brought this up. And I said, Maharaj, this is what happened, and that instruction, declare boldly. But I feel like a hypocrite because I know there are many anarthas in me. And how can I even consider myself to be a devotee? So Maharaj says, yes, at least you're doing the regulative principles. But look at this as providence giving you a signal to get more serious with whatever you're doing. So Maharaj, what I understood and gathered from all this is we hear sadhu sangha, sarva shastra, right? Siddhi. I don't understand what's the siddhi. It's very easy to memorize and tell others this thing, but what is that siddhi? And what I feel is the Siddhi is the level of tolerance, the level of acceptance, and not get knee-jerk reaction to whatever is the external stimuli. That was one. And looking at this, carrying it forward, Maharaj, just last week and continuing this week, there's a lot of turmoil in Bangladesh.
Mm.
And unfortunately, I've also seen live videos of the Islamists going into ISKCON temples and vandalizing the deities, and they're killing and murdering even Hindus and Vaishnavas. So there is a lot of anger and frustration, Maharaj. My Guru Maharaj says, do not hate the actor, hate the crime, not the person perpetrating the act. But it becomes very difficult, Maharaj, when you see such a thing, to have these level of tolerance. So on one end, this experience you gave I really owe it to you, Maharaj. You said, increase your rounds. And somehow or the other, it's happening. It's Abhas, but Maharaj, there is some maybe slight transformation. But then at the other end, the tolerance and patience for such acts, I just can't deal with it, Maharaj. So how do we get more tolerant, more patient?
Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavatya kinchana sarvairganis tatra samasute sara. He knows the verse. Some persons in the room may not know the verse. The verse is the Bhagavatam verse that says the characteristics, the lakshana, the characteristics of a sura or a godly person become decorations in the life of one who engages in Hari Bhakti. And it's not like there's a supermarket. There's a Sura Lakshana supermarket. You go into supermarket and you pay the right price and they give you characteristics. It's not mechanical. It's devotional. And so the answer how to is devotional. And the devotional means the quality with which moving from Abbas to Shuddha, so these striving to go from Abbas to Shuddha, to pure, and chanting and serving and thising and thating, the practices with the purpose that Krishna is to be pleased. It's very simple. And back to his question, how do you get there? It's a similar question. How do you get there? More tolerant or more attached. It's bhakti when the focus is right. The focus is, it's not about me. It's not about me becoming more tolerant. It's about me becoming more fixed on the idea that Krishna is to be pleased. So obviously, this conduct, I haven't seen the videos, and I don't plan to go look at them, but I'm aware that these things are going on. And how do you just like don't look or ignore? That's one. But you have to move to the transcendental platform. To be tolerant is attachment to Krishna. The tolerance is this level, and then the attachment to Krishna takes it above and above. Oh, Lord Nityananda being hit in the head by Jagai or Madhai, and that's okay, chant Hare Krishna. Now that's not us. But it's the platform to strive for, where the attachment to the Supreme Personality of Godhead becomes deeper, and then the tolerance becomes more prominent. All godly qualities become decorations of such a person. And in Prabhupada's words, two things. We don't have to strive independently. We strive for pleasing Krishna. And meanwhile, I'm agitated because I'm aware of these things, etc., etc. It makes me angry. we're called upon to become transcendentalists. Living in this world, we're called upon to become transcendentalists. Because if it's not this, it's that. If it's not that, it's another thing. How did become transcendentalists? Become attached to Krishna? That's your question. He's asking your question in a different way. Same question, similar question. Anything else? Let's do the last. This is the last question. Anyone else? Here, over here in the corner. Behind you, over this way. Ah. Going to Prabhupada, Hare Krishna. The microphone doesn't seem to be on yet. You have to do a little more. There you go.
There we go.
There we go.
I suppose more a reflection and gratitude than specifically a question. I once heard, if you say, I want to go get a chocolate ice cream cone with rainbow sprinkles, and you go and they only have vanilla and chocolate sprinkles, you will be disappointed. But if you say, I want an ice cream cone, it doesn't matter what flavor, you'll be happy. And what I am taking away from your class today is, if I wake up and say, how may I be of service?
Yes.
Please engage me in your service. Whatever the day brings, as long as I get to be a servant, I'm happy. And if I further say, what can I learn from this experience? It doesn't matter if it was a, quote, happy or, quote, distressful. I just learned something.
Yeah.
So if
That-
I get to be a servant and I get to learn something, then there's happiness.
And just some feedback on what you just shared with us. You are in effect redefining what happiness is. Happiness is the mode of service directed towards that Krishna is to be pleased, and that's happiness. And then Krishna can make it like this or like that, and it's okay because it's Krishna's happiness. And that's what happiness is. That's a nice note to end on. Thank you all for coming. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.